I keep hearing about Bitcoin bridges to Avalanche. What is that? What are people talking about when they say that they are bringing their Bitcoin to one of these ecosystems?
So there's basically, when you're talking about bridge, you're talking about different types of bridges, but you're enable people to bring assets over from a different chain onto one chain to chain number 2 and allow the functionality that you have on chain 2 that perhaps you may have different experience from chain 1. So there's a Ethereum to Avalanche bridge. That thing has generated over $60 billion worth of assets moving back and forth over time. And now there is a Bitcoin bridge. So people who want to hodl Bitcoin but use DeFi, they have the ability to do that through this bridge.
And when that happens, like what is at a high level, the technical kind of mechanics of this? Is it Bitcoin and it's being wrapped in some other kind of token? Is it literally bridging over and there's like support for Bitcoin or whatever? Like, how does that work?
Right. So there's 2 different or 3 different methods.
Okay.
One way you're describing is the wrapped concept, where you have it on one end and then you have another one called a wrapped version on the other end. There's another way to do it is really you can have stuff on one side being locked, but then you have a native version of that on the other end that acts as the same thing. So it's not necessarily any different. You're just minting a new asset, whether it's BTC or whatever it is. So there's 2 general ways of bridging across. One is the wrap, like you talked about, and the other is actually just locking the asset value on one end and creating the same asset or a native version of that asset on the other end.
And when that happens, how much functionality is gained or lost? Like, it's interesting to think about, let's take Bitcoin as one example, and then maybe we use ETH as another example. So Bitcoin may not be as expressive or kind of have as much of the smart contract functionality as maybe an ETH has. When you see that, do you lose or gain functionality in either one of those situations when you do these bridges?
That's a great question. And generally speaking, from the user's perspective, you're gaining more functionality regardless of whether it's the wrap version or the native version to another chain, because you're doing that either because one side is too cheap or too expensive, you need it to transact cheaper, or there are different applications on a different chain. And so the user's perspective is you're not losing functionality. You do it because you actually gain functionality where you can't do it on the previous chain. From the chain's perspective, obviously, you increase activity and liquidity, so it's kind of like a win-win. The ones that are secure and are able to do this well and have assets that are secure to the user will ultimately win in these cases.
Got it. And so when you think of kind of Avalanche, why are people bridging these assets over there? What's like the value proposition to doing that versus like keeping Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network or something?
Yeah, I mean, for Bitcoin specifically, there is less functionality, but in general, especially Avalanche's case, there's over 1,000 applications on the chain. It's instant finality, it's super fast. There's lots of dApps and DeFi, as well as gaming applications. So just a lot of utility and functionality for Bitcoin users who may want to keep their Bitcoin because they think the price is too low, but also get to use the functionality associated with a chain like Avalanche.
So let's kind of keep going down this rabbit hole because it's actually pretty interesting to me. On Bitcoin, there would be 2, I would say, scaling solutions. And this can be super generalized, right? But there's like layer 2 solutions like the Lightning Network. And then there's kind of side chain things, Liquid and a bunch of others. This sounds like it's almost like a third value proposition that people would make is like, hey, you could take the asset, you could bridge it either natively or kind of in a true bridge in a wrapped way. And then you could gain speed, efficiency, innovation, whatever. Do you see those as competitive to like the layer 2s and side chains, or is it just something that's different and kind of distinct?
I think there's 2 different questions. There's like side chains and layer 2 specific to Lightning specific to Bitcoin. And then there are layer 2s that exist in the, call it, EVM compatible type ecosystem. The reality is in the long run, I think there's going to be a lot of interoperability among many, many different chains. And that's really where we all really, deep down, if you are honest with yourselves, that's where we want the space to go to. Layer 2s, they provide certain functionality, but they also are not able to provide necessarily a lot of the decentralization and the security that a layer 1 can. But they do, they're more centralized, so they can probably be cheaper and faster in some respect. So there are different trade-offs, but over time, I think it's about where the community, where the applications are, and there will be multiple winners. And then the interoperability is what really the power of the permissionless world of blockchain that we all want, where people can actually own their data and profit from their, data and have low switching costs. So over time, there will be a few, or maybe more than a few winners, but there will be interoperability.
And when you look at that, the interoperability argument, there's people, and I think in every ecosystem that would say like, no, we don't want interoperability. There's some sort of maximalist view or whatever. What's your kind of vision of that interoperable world? Like, why do you say that that is what we want?
Well, let's reduce this argument to the most basic level. Like Web 2, in my opinion, scale, we've all benefited from certain efficiencies, but the infrastructure on a certain level operates very poorly from interoperability. It's basically siloed databases, monolithic databases. Everyone has to constantly update it themselves. You have to create APIs and permission who gets into where and what. And then you have to, over time, you have to reconcile that. So you have a gazillion intermediaries and a lot of middleware that's built, and you allow a lot of centralization, and people who get bigger have a lot of power over the new entrants to anything. So over time, what happens is, like, look at Swift Network. It's supposed to be a nonprofit, but it takes 5 days for you to send money from the US to an international friend. It's those intermediaries and the painful middleware and other things related to that causes that delay. So if you have a permissionless world, whether it's seamless and chains out there like Avalanche that are instant settlement, instant finality, payment and settlement happens very close to each other or at the same time. And when you have this decentralized public immutable type situation, suddenly you're unlocking trap value. Basically, look at the Swift network or look at credit cards. What you're doing is you have one counterparty to another waiting basically for the validation that those transactions are real. And while it's waiting for 30 days at the bank to pay the merchant at the restaurant, you are literally taking money out of the system. By having it in a permissionless world where things can move smoothly and fast, suddenly you are literally making money more productive. So increasing the velocity of money and effectively actually even growing the economy. I mean, GDP is money supply times velocity of money.
So when you start to look at other use cases, what else are you excited about? Like where else is this technology going?
So obviously DeFi is something that Avalanche is very excited about. And if we look at DeFi 2.0, when we come out of this, call it winter, and we have spring, really excited about a couple of things, because for DeFi to really explode and to grow, you need new participants to come into the ecosystem. And that means tokenizing real world assets and ultimately having some sort of identity mechanism, on-chain identity mechanism, so that you can really enable that representation of a person or a thing properly. Because if you look at DeFi 1.0, I think everyone in the crypto world will agree that the DeFi apps function pretty well, given all the stuff we hear from the CeFi type players. No one got their withdrawals halted, transactions continue, code was the law, and it all happened. Sure, it was painful. These, Aave, Maker, Compound lost a lot of TVL, but they functioned and everyone got their money. In fact, it did pretty well in my opinion. However, the basic mechanisms to allow that were the smart contract code, rules embedded into the code, and the over collateralization. So in DeFi 1.0, to get to DeFi 2.0, which we all want, which is to bring new users in, you can't use a system where you're over collateralizing with existing crypto assets. That means just people who are already in the system, who have assets, are able to use the system. No new collateral comes in means no new people coming in. So in order to get new people to come in, you need less volatility in that asset. We try to do it with stable coins in the crypto native. But if you tokenize real world assets, that inherently is less stable. You also invite new players in. But to do that, especially with financial services firms, you need some sort of proper KYC, AML, and identity associated with it. So we are really excited for real world assets that will be tokenized to grow the whole DeFi pie for everyone.
It seems like every kind of blockchain, every ecosystem is trying to do this. So obviously the Ether and Ethereum ecosystem have been talking about this a long time. I've seen Solana pitches, Bitcoin with the Taro protocol built on top of Lightning, Avalanche, etc. Does it matter where stuff gets built? Like, if I use Google, I couldn't tell you what the technical architecture is. I just know I type question in a box and I get an answer, and Google, it's cool to me. This answers my question. Like, is it ultimately going to matter?
Isn't that the world we all want to go to, where the underlying, anything under the hood is completely abstracted away? I think actually the fun part right now is trying to build and create and be one of those players in order to do that. But yes, the end result will be like, your stuff is served in AWS. You have no idea whether it's AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. And one day you just Google it and you can do it, and you abstract away the entire everything under the hood. When I drive my car, I could not fix the engine, but I know how to drive a car. That's literally where we want to get to. But right now, it's a lot of fun. And it does matter a little bit right now because there are differences in technology, differences in speed and scale, and differences in value proposition. So I think in the long run or medium term, the ones that have better value propositions will ultimately win out. But to the user in the long run, it doesn't really matter. Abstract it away.